Over the last 2 years, I've spoken with 643 developers from every corner of the freaking planet. That's 160 hours yapping on the phone with a lot of you out there listening or watching this. You've maybe found the link on Parsity or at one of my other products or on LinkedIn. Somehow you found this link to schedule a chat with me. And it's not a sales call at all. I get on these chats, and at first it was a sales tactic. I was going to get people on the call, see if they had questions about a program or an offer I was making, and then try to get them to buy. But it quickly turned into something way different and better and cooler than I could have ever imagined. These are really short, 15 minutes. Why 15 minutes? Because if it's awkward, we can just leave. Also, it makes people get to the point really quickly. Also, I just don't have a lot of time. And these are phone calls. I don't do video chats. I'm already on camera enough during the day. I don't necessarily want to be on video during the middle of the day. And also, it allows me to take a call in between like a kid's soccer game or in between the gym or whenever. And so I've done a lot of these calls, and they've been, for the majority, really, really great. I'd say 99.9% of them are awesome. And I've rarely ever met anybody super weird or odd or awkward during the calls. And I've learned a ton. So sometimes the conversations would lead to mentorship services or enrollment in Parsity, but again, that's just not the goal. So I continue to learn a lot from these conversations, and I kind of see giving back as a duty from all the help that I've received over the years. If you don't know my story, really quickly, I learned to code after leaving crime and some addiction issues and things like that, and then driving Lyft and Uber in the city of San Francisco, meeting software developers that worked at some of the best companies in the world, and then them giving me advice. One even wrote me a long, detailed email telling me what I should do. I eventually went to a coding boot camp and then have worked in tech for the last 10 years. So I feel like so many great strangers have helped me out that the least I can do, besides I also have a business making money and I work full time as a software developer, is to give back as much as possible within reason. So I've learned a ton from these conversations, and I want to share with you some of the major pain points that I see in our community as developers. So if you're learning how to code, you're probably the person that is going to relate to these problems the most. These are the top 3 issues that I see that most developers struggle with early in their career. So one, your problems are not unique at all. They're not unique at all. You have the most generic problems on the planet. I didn't know this. As a guy in California, San Francisco Bay Area, learning how to code, and now 10 years into this profession, I thought, I had such a unique, crazy story. Now I've spoken with people from Nigeria, Pakistan, Alaska, everywhere in between. And the kid in Pakistan from a family of engineers and doctors who got a computer science degree, he's struggling with the same issues as the woman in California who graduated from a boot camp and was working as a cashier. And so you're cool. You're like, okay, I'm dealing with the same problem. So what? So you want some solutions, not sympathy. And I have a bit of both, right? Let's dive into the top 3 issues that you're likely encountering or going to encounter as you learn to code and become a software developer. Number 1, biggest one, imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome seems so generic now that it's almost like played out to even talk about it, I feel like. But I know the feeling, and it's crippling. It can be debilitating. You might think, I feel like the worst developer on the team once you get hired. Or maybe you feel like, I'm just not smart enough. I'm not ready to apply to jobs yet. Or maybe you're in a coding boot camp and you're like, I just don't get this stuff. And you think that everybody else is, and it's just you, or the material sucks, or something. You're just not getting it. And we all know this feeling. Whenever you do something new, whether it's working out, or trying to start reading, or going to a coding boot camp, or going to college, or whatever, you just feel this feeling. Just start a new job anywhere. Start a new job at McDonald's. You're going to feel like an idiot for a while. You're going to be like, geez, I don't get this. How am I ever going to get this? And eventually, you kind of do, but it takes some time. And sometimes there's some truth to this feeling. It's not all just in your head. It's not like, oh man, don't worry, it's going to be all rainbows and sunshine. I'll just keep at it. I don't think that's helpful advice at all. It certainly wasn't for me, because I have been the worst on the team. I felt that I was the worst on the team, and it was actually true. I for sure was the worst developer on this team. There's only 3 of us, by the way, and I was the worst one. And it's not a fun feeling to have. Here's what I did and what I recommend you to do. One is to write out the skills that you're missing from your toolbox. What do the smarter people know? And smarter in quotes, right? What are the people that you look up to? What do they know? And what do you not know that they know? There's a delta there. There's a gap in the experience and the knowledge. So how do you fill in that gap? Next, make a plan to actually acquire the skills. You need a plan of action. It can't just be, I don't know enough and I'm never going to know. It's like, well, no, what do you exactly need to know? Get very exact and precise, and then make a plan to acquire these skills. This sounds really simple, but it's shocking how many people just don't do this at all. They just get into this weird loop in their head where they're like, I'll just wait it out, or I'll just kind of figure out, maybe one day it'll just go away. You want to prove to yourself ultimately that you deserve the position that you're currently in. If you're anything like me, when I got a job and I got paid a lot of money, honestly, that was a big freak out moment for me. I'm like, they're paying me this much. What do they expect from me right now? I was coming from making $50,000, $60,000 and thought maybe one day I can get $100,000. If I'm really lucky and I'm a senior developer, I got hired at the second job for $120,000 and I was freaking out. And for some people, that's like, oh, that's not even that much. At the time, for me, that was an ungodly amount of money to make. I was like, this is life changing. I'd literally doubled my salary. And I was like, this is crazy. What am I going to do? What do they expect? How can I possibly live up to these expectations? And that money and working with people that I just considered smarter than me just completely took me for a ride. And I was not prepared. And I had serious anxiety, like crippling anxiety. Like I dreaded going to work every day. I was like, oh my God, is this the day I'm going to get fired? Oh, I'm going to be found out. They're going to hate me. I just shut up for like 2 years. I just didn't say anything. And I was so freaked out during this time. So I needed to prove to myself that I should be there, that I should be making this money. And eventually I got so like freaked out over it that I just had to make a plan, or else I'm like, this can't be good for my health. Like this money, no matter what, it can't be good for me to stay here and feel like this. So I need a plan to get these skills that I'm missing. So I literally wrote them out. I wrote them out, and I have a document attached to this episode in the show notes that you can steal that will tell you exactly the process I followed. Very simple. Just listed out what I thought I needed to know, what I didn't know, and then a plan to do those things. So hopefully you find that helpful as well. And remember this, after speaking to all these people, I talked to a guy that works at Amazon, right? And he's a senior engineer. And I'm like, what the hell are you calling me for? Pretty much, right? And he said he was feeling imposter syndrome after getting promoted to senior. He felt like he was really lucky, that he basically got the job out of total luck, and he eventually would be found out. So just know this, you're not alone. And if there's any comfort in knowing this, that other people much further up the ladder feel the same way. It's also a little bit sad to hear that because you think eventually it'll just go away. It doesn't. So you need to make a plan to actually deal with it. And remember this too. Confidence comes after you start something, not before. The second issue that most of you are dealing with, people in Parsity are dealing with, and most people call me about this one, the first job. They can't get it. And I know the story. You've applied to every company in the tri-state area. No one is hiring. The market is saturated. I've heard some version of all these things for like 10 years now. I don't mean to trivialize or even laugh at them. Well, maybe I do a little bit. I don't know. I've been there. I got laid off. I got hired. I've been on the job market. I've helped other people get hired over the years. There's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of all sorts of things involved. I'm over talking about whether it's possible or not. Like, yeah, obviously it's possible to get hired. I don't even think that's a point of contention or even a thing to speak about. I think those just make really good YouTube videos for people that are like, oh, you can't, no one's hiring anywhere and it's impossible and the market is crashing. They said that 2 years ago. Go to YouTube actually and look up the number of videos that were about the economy crashing in 3 weeks, or the tech market crashing, or no one's hiring developers, or AI is taking your job, or Webflow is taking your job, or all these silly fear-mongering tactics that sell videos. But they're just kind of boring to me now because I'm like, these hype cycles will continue. In another year or in 6 months or whatever, there'll be another thing that happens and people run to YouTube and talk about it for clicks and views, and it'll frustrate and scare a lot of people that are new to tech. Anyway, here's some harsh truths for you, my friend. Mass applying can work. I don't care what influencer tells you differently. Even if I've said that mass applying doesn't work, I know it does. I've seen people get hired from mass applying. Mass applying means going out and sending your resume out to 5,000, 10,000 companies. I think this is a silly tactic. I really do. But I know it works. And I know that most developers who I'm close to and that I know personally have not done a whole lot of quote unquote networking online. Now, for bootcamp grads and people that are career changers, this advice actually changes. I do believe you should be doing as much networking as you feel comfortable with, and even more networking than you feel comfortable with. And that's by being on LinkedIn, showing what you're learning in public, writing about code-related things, not hot takes or silly stuff. I have a whole course on this, by the way, at jointaro.com, how to break into tech as an outsider, and that's free for a limited time. Totally free. It's a really great course. I put it together with no tech like stuff in it, no coding stuff, just like pure actionable advice on what you should be writing, what you should be doing, how you should be building your side projects. cool stuff that I think you'll find helpful. Here's some other kind of harsh truths. Luck is a factor, and no one wants to admit that. So I've been hired many times. I know students that have been hired from Parsity and other people that have been hired. If you're a software developer, you're going to work more than a few jobs, right, over your lifetime. You're not going to get into one place and work there for 15 years. All of us are going to go through multiple jobs, too many actually, to be honest with you. I kind of want some more stability in my life now. But you're going to go through a lot of job hopping as a software developer. And luck is a massive factor. I've been an engineering manager hiring people. I know sometimes I've met really qualified people that I had to turn down because, oops, you got scheduled after a person that we already made an offer to. We're not going to renege that offer. Or, oops, you might not be the most qualified person, but you're the only person that we have in line right now for the position, and now you have the job. So luck can play a factor in both ways. Or, oops, maybe I didn't come in prepared for the interview and I gave you a softball question and I wasn't prepared to ask you a much more difficult question that would have let me know more about your skills as a software engineer, and now you have the job. Or maybe the person you're talking to had a really bad day. Their wife divorced him that morning. They couldn't reschedule the interview. You came in, they hated the world, and they said, screw it, I'm not going with this person. They look like my ex-husband. They look like my ex-wife. And no, you're not getting hired just for that fact alone. You don't know. So stop trying to replay these things in your mind all the time and see what you could have done right or wrong or whatever. Sometimes there's nothing you could have done and luck was just a factor. You can control your skills, not the timeline to get hired, which is actually the reason why I stopped doing the job guarantee at Parsity. I thought it was a little bit gimmicky, to be completely honest. It was a marketing tactic, and I saw that the intention was to get people to complete the program and to do exactly what we said to do. Because we see that people that graduate and do the things have like a 95% success rate. But the problem is a lot of people just don't graduate and then they don't do the stuff and they don't get the outcome they want. So I thought this would be an incentive for them to do it. But really, it hasn't been the incentive that I thought it would be. And I thought, what do really good schools do? Does a really good school give you a money back guarantee if you don't get hired within some time period? And I looked at the places that are offering that, and I'll just be honest. I don't want to be anything like those places. So I'm not doing that. If that's what they're doing over there in the big boot camp world, I have no desire to be part of boot camps really in general, and especially not the big ones that are mass producing people that can't get hired. I want to be an elite crew of software developers, not some cookie cutter big tech marketing junk. So I'm cutting it out. And of course, back to the truth that, no one can guarantee when you're going to get hired. You could be super qualified and take a year. You could be kind of unqualified and get hired like in a month. I've seen both things happen. I went to a coding boot camp with a CS grad. He has a computer science degree from a really nice school. I think he went to like San Luis Obispo or some school down south that I was impressed. I was like, oh wow, why is he in here with us? He wanted to learn more practical stuff. It took him a year to get hired. Me, on the other hand, knowing nothing, barely can code my way out of a paper bag here, strictly front-end developer. This guy was full stack before being full stack was like the thing to do, and he took a full year to get hired. Me, on the other hand, I got hired 8 weeks into the coding bootcamp. Pretty wild. Here's some stuff you should get fixed really quickly if you do want to get hired, and here's what I tell everybody that makes a phone call with me. Get 500 connections on LinkedIn. Have a picture of yourself. Why do you need 500 connections? Because you need to be more discoverable. It basically connects you to everybody on the planet. Remove any mention of junior, aspiring, student from your profile. Please do that for me. And please, for the love of Bob, don't apply for only junior roles. Let the market decide your ability and level. I kind of don't even like the word junior. I use it a lot because we all know what I'm talking about when I say junior. But this whole idea of junior developer versus senior developer, yes, these are titles, these are things, but don't put too much stock into them. They don't really mean anything. They're just kind of arbitrary titles at some level. Being a senior at one company could be something wildly different than being a senior at other companies. I do think there are some senior level traits that everybody should have once they become senior, and you can hear more about that in another episode about the death of the junior developer. Anyway, I would let the market decide. Don't just market yourself as a junior developer. No one wants to hire junior developers, but people do hire junior developers. Let me give you an example real quick. I was hiring for a junior developer position. We have 2 junior developer positions open at the last company I was at, and I was hiring for them. I said, don't put junior in the title, please, because we're going to get flooded with requests. And the HR person didn't, and I was really glad. So we got junior people, of course, that were applying. And we hired 2 junior people that had no previous job experience. We just didn't put junior in the title because, again, we didn't want to get like 1,000 requests. It was going to be a simple problem of like, well, can we handle this many People, it's only me and like a couple other people looking at these resumes. We really want to look at 1,000, or do we want to look at a few hundred? At least that's more manageable. Lastly, use strong language on your resume to stand out. Stop saying, I built this tiny app in TypeScript, saying I architected a large-scale web app and deployed it using these tools and CI/CD pipelines. Something that makes it sound more impressive. If you sound really small, if you make yourself sound smaller, you're going to be part of the crowd. It's hard to stand out when you're making yourself sound really small. Like, oh, I just built this thing. I used to hate it when people came to interviews and they would say, oh, well, I just built this little thing for this boot camp I was in, but I'm like, why would you tell me that? I'm here to hire you potentially, and now you're giving me reasons not to hire you. Why would you do that? Some people say, well, I'm just telling the truth, and I only speak the truth. You're playing a game where your job is to get hired. I'm not at all suggesting you lie, but I'm not suggesting you tell people everything about you that would be to your detriment and tell them to maybe not hire you. What the hell kind of game are you playing? I'm playing to win, and I hope you are too. There's also a guide to fix your resume in the show notes as well. I have all sorts of little guides down there this time because I really want to help you out and I want to see you win this game. Lastly, my favorite one. What should I build? I need a side project. And it depends. I give people very different advice depending on their situation. First of all, forget the portfolio. No one's going to really look at that portfolio. I know if you're a front-end developer specifically, that portfolio might be more important, or if you're trying to get freelance work, that portfolio is probably really important. But for the majority of us, like 90% of us, I wouldn't even consider the portfolio. I wouldn't even really worry about it, to be completely honest. I would have a really good side project, however. And one is to create some emotional attachment to your learning so you don't just quit. Because if you're just pounding LeetCode or building something off a tutorial from YouTube, first of all, there's no real emotional attachment to that. Because why do you care if you're building a Netflix clone? Why would that really interest you? Unless you really love Netflix clones or something like that. Two, you want to improve your relevant practical skills. So most bootcamp grads and university students, they find their productivity just drops off a cliff. You look at their GitHub contributions, and the moment they graduate, no more GitHub contributions. And they might see that without structured learning, they rely on random tutorials, or they get sold on some other language to learn. They end up going to Python or Go or Java or Rust or C# or Ruby or whatever. They just start going in these learning loops, these circles that they never really emerge from. It's hard to sustain your interest when you're pounding LeetCode problems or just watching YouTube videos indefinitely. So what should you actually build? Well, one, you need to figure out something that will solve a problem for you, your community, your friends, your work, organizations, something that you have some attachment to. You have to find a problem and think, what can I build to solve this problem? You are a builder as a software developer. You're also a problem solver. And at some level, you're also a little bit of like a business person. So you go to a company, an organization, they have problems. They don't always have clear solutions to these problems. A lot of your job as a software developer, the higher you get up in the organization, is to figure out, well, what are the problems? One, to identify them. Two, to come up with solutions and propose solutions. So having a side project is a really good way to start building a little bit of this muscle. Look at where you work as one place and say, what could we do here? What could make this place better to work, more efficient? Is there anything we could automate? Is there anything in my uncle's business, my brother's business? Is there anything at the hair salon that my buddy works at that we could do to make this better? The mechanic shop, whatever, the barbecue restaurant. People at Parsity have actually done these things, or students that have actually built these things like inventory management systems for their companies or a way to automate things for their current work that have helped them out to build stuff. And when it comes to the tech stack, I would just do something that you're kind of familiar with. So I wouldn't go too far in some crazy direction. I would learn like mostly what you already know, and then maybe add one or two things that you want to know that you don't, that are really good in the market. So for example, if you went to your average coding bootcamp, you probably want to learn TypeScript and unit testing because most coding programs don't teach that, yet most jobs want that. And if you went to Parsity, of course, you already know this. And of course, as my last little guide for you, there's a side project template in the show notes. So now what? I hope you find some comfort in knowing that you're not totally alone in these struggles. And I was pretty shocked to find out just how common these problems really are. And against advice from people that I actually paid as mentors, I had a business mentor a year ago, and I pay for mentors myself. I believe in the power of having somebody that knows what they're doing tell you what to do. And one of them actually said, you should stop doing these calls. This is crazy. Like, you're just giving away information for free. He said, it's not bad. He's like, but if there's no follow up, you're talking to people that probably have zero intention of ever buying anything from you. And he had a really good point. And I won't lie, I don't think that he was silly for telling me that. I think that he had a good point. He was looking out for my best interest. I still plan to do these calls. And I don't know when I'm going to ever stop doing them. I don't necessarily just give out the link or put it out there really prominently as much as I used to. But if you can find it, feel free to schedule a chat with me. I hope it's worth your while. But honestly, I think if you've listened to this episode by now, you've probably got as much information as you need to get, because I've kind of laid out all the common problems that you likely have. But I always love hearing from people, seeing what's going on out there, if I'm right, wrong, what's changing, how they're doing, what the market's like. So I really get a lot of value out of these calls too, and I hope the rest of people do too. So here's to another 643 calls. See you around.